Hello, welcome back. I'm Jack Valvis with Oasis Digital. We're going to be working on the Angular Bootcamp curriculum today. Joining me is
Kyle Cordis.
Lance Finney.
Chris Harden.
Zachary Kipping. So, Zachary, you've got some more changes that you want to propose to us. Can you
Yes.
take us through those?
So the initial change in this branch, because this branch is a little bit of just some extra random thoughts I had for the title, but in step 303, with the async pipe step, pretty much every class I teach, while teaching this step, I go through the process of live coding an example of the resubscription functionality of the async pipe.
Let's get the running app up on the screen too, if we can, and you can kind of point.
Do you still have it running?
I don't think you guys are
don't
running.
have it running.
And the specific code in the step that I wrote isn't like super important because that can obviously be rewritten to whatever we want it to be.
Yeah,
But the
I just want to
functionality, yeah,
I want to be showing it
yeah,
while we're talking about
exactly.
it.
The
if we can.
functionality is the thing I want.
So this is on 303, which is like quite close to the beginning
Did you check out my
of
branch?
talking about async
No, I
types.
haven't.
Yeah. Well, it's the first time they're introduced.
Yeah.
Right, so
It
check
is
out my branch.
we've done everything with subscribes that we've never unsubscribed up until now, and so now we're going to show you a better way to do it.
Okay, so this thing I would use a behavior subject. So like, what if you hit refresh, that's when it goes out and fetches the
Yeah,
data.
okay.
And now if you hit refresh again,
Yeah.
it'll keep grabbing the data. You have
So
to look at
my-
the network, but it keeps
So my initial feeling is
getting the data.
this could be good to have, but almost certainly not at the step when we introduce the async.
Right,
the
yeah,
first time.
exactly,
That's
yeah.
my first thought.
Right, like by the time I get around to live coding this, they've already workshopped all the stuff. We've already talked about it a lot, and through the process of this, I'm like, oh, by the way, like usually I'll bring up because there's 3 sets of functionality
Right.
to an async pipe. We talked about 2. The
Right.
third set though is this thing, and this is kind of how you show it.
Right. So we should
So I want
probably. It
something
seems
to
like
it.
there's probably a need for a step that we would copy and figure out where to put it and make some variant of it
Possibly.
that covers this I want to control when it loads scenario.
So I'm not sure about this third feature. Yeah, I know.
Well, it's not really a third. He's just saying
Well,
if I make a thing that asyncs to put data on the screen, and now the user comes in and they demand a button to reload it,
Yeah,
how do I do that?
But wouldn't our preferred way of doing that be to create a subject trigger?
I believe he
not
does
such
do that.
That's what I-
observable
No, he
That's
does
what I
do
do.
that. He does do that.
But that doesn't have anything to do with resubscribing.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's-
through the process of that,
Well-
I do so what I did before was I did reassigning the observable,
Well, let's
Yeah.
start
but
looking.
then I showed
yeah.
a better way of
So,
doing it with the trigger.
I'm pretty sure there is a step that we have somewhere in here, like an example that is actually shows that
Reassigning the
behavior.
observable.
Not reassigning the observable, but taking an observable out of the template and then putting it back and showing
There
that
is
it gets
that.
resubscribed to.
There is that. But let's
Which that?
let's just start looking at your code
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can.
with the understanding we're looking at code that we're probably going to put in another step. So there's probably no reason to change this step, right?
Mhm.
Once we.
No.
So we're not
I use this step
You
as
use
a
this
catalyst. Yeah.
So we're talking about taking this and going somewhere. Okay, so show us what you got here. So you have a button. What's that button do?
We'll fetch the data. We'll just fetch the data to.
Tells
You
the
have to go
service
into the
to fetch
service.
the data. Okay.
And that subject should probably be behavior subject. But
So you have a
that's the same.
subject that switch maps to trigger loading the data.
So here you're not demonstrating, and
I-
here you're at the final
Current
step.
code, yes. And my previous thing, I built up to this,
Yeah.
Right.
which I only committed this just because I wanted a talking point.
Sure.
But
Right.
my step through this was, all right, third functionality of async pipe, resubscription. Right, if you reassign an observable, it'll unsubscribe from the old one, subscribe to the new one.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's
So I did the reassigning.
So it's kind of like a super, like a meta level thing here. Our own instructor, so everybody watching, this is a small segment of the whole team of people that sometimes teach it, and we found that some of the very best people that have watched this are other instructors.
Yep.
So if you're another instructor and you make changes in class over a series of changes to demonstrate something, just go ahead and commit at each step. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. If you could drop a series of 10 commits in, here's 10 permutations I did in class to have more to talk about later. That way you don't have to remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Yeah,
I just went through I did this in a process of
Yeah.
half an hour. I just kept monologuing.
So
I
I'll
do.
pop the stack for the meta. Go ahead.
So setting aside the whole resubscription thing for a minute,
Mhm.
I have been thinking that we really need a step that has something as simple as this, because like we have other steps in there about creating observable pipelines, but they're so complicated. And in my current project, they've made the same mistake all over the place, and really they need to understand trigger subject switch map to do this sort of thing. And like this is a nice small example that doesn't blow your mind.
So I want to go back a step from that. What is the, like, let's say I have a screen and it has an HTTP and it loads some data and it shows it on there. What is the right way to give the user an explicit reload?
I would say to have like whatever the thing is that loads the data. So there's probably some data layer, like a service. Right? Yeah. I would say that thing just exposes an observable for that data.
Right.
And anyone can grab it, share, replay it, whatever. Right. And then I'm not even doing that in this case because it's just only one service is using it. But in a real world app, I would share, replay that. Right. And then I would have like kind of like what I have here. I would have I would actually have probably a behavior subject because I want to get in the beginning.
So I want to go back more steps. Like, firstly,
because it's not going to get the data right away otherwise.
Replay subject, maybe.
I'm keeping going back more steps.
Be a replay subject.
Keep going back more steps.
Sorry.
Why does the user have to ask that the data be refreshed?
So I have an example in the app that we've been working on that we have a table there, and if you add something to the table was not getting refreshed, or if you delete something from the table, it wasn't getting refreshed. So we needed to add a reload trigger like this to refresh the data.
Well, that's you heads up in the code. I'm saying in the very simplest case, why does the user need a button to say show me the current data? Like, shouldn't it already be showing the user the current data?
Yeah, it should. That's why I said use a replay subject. Or
No.
You're saying why aren't they getting live data?
The universe has changed. Why has the screen not changed?
Not using the interval.
Because we're not using WebSockets or server-sent events.
Right. So I think that's like the first most important piece of context.
Well, I mean, the reason I was saying this is a great step is not so much for the refresh step, but like, you know, what I keep seeing, because I've been doing this refactor like over and over again, is that they don't understand, you know, it's like, okay, we have a table. Oh, now on our next sprint, we're going to add a type ahead search filter. And then our next sprint, we're going to add a checkbox filter over here. And then our next sprint, we're going to add a sort. And then our next sprint, we're going to add this. And all of those are added making separate calls to a service that says HTTP GET.
Which is bad.
Right.
Much bad.
And then it's just, you know, loading whatever, whenever.
Okay.
But this is the answer. It's no. You know, the first time you did this, you did it with a subject and the get, and then every time you add in one of these new requirements, you just calling subject.next in a new spot.
Okay.
And is it, you know what I'm saying?
But I want to get to that.
Okay.
But first, like, it seems to me that if we're at the point where because you're talking about like it's still an internal concern, right?
What do you mean?
Like inside the code, I have to write some code to cause something to happen. And that's what you were talking about. Inside the code, I as a programmer.
No, I'm talking about you keep adding things to the screen for the user to trigger requests because they're either updating the filter or
but in your case, the user is changing the question being asked. Yeah. And therefore, obviously, we need to update the answer on the screen.
Right.
But you're talking about the question being asked is not changed.
Correct.
But the user has to press a button. And I'm saying I think we need to acknowledge that, like, we're already like down a notch. A top quality application already shows the correct answer now, not the correct answer at some past unknown time. So the ideal answer is that if you have like a service exposing an observable about the state of the world, then that service's job should be to keep that observable describing the current state of the world, and that you should do backend programming or whatever to make that true. Does that seem?
Unless you want caching, but yeah.
Yeah,
well, of course you want caching, yeah.
Okay. So the Reddit example does complicated pipelines directly off of form controls, which is great.
Yeah.
But what I like about this example is that he's using what I call a trigger subject.
Yeah, sure.
So my point is, I think we need a step that has a trigger subject step.
Yeah.
In a service like he's doing. Now maybe refresh isn't the best.
Yeah, refresh I just did
the best
off
example
run,
of it.
Right.
But exactly this, but maybe, you know, instead of refresh, it's something. Add a type ahead without using the form control.
I would never do a refresh button.
So what I'm getting at is, I'm I agree completely. We need an example explaining the trigger subject idea. So like that's not even we obviously desperately need that. And we're probably gonna like create that in a couple minutes here, right?
Okay.
But I'm skeptical that we would do it. I'm kind of go back and forth. If we do it with the explicit refresh button, what I'm concerned is we are endorsing doing a thing that really shouldn't be done. Like the button should be labeled refresh button, comma, I apologize for having to do this, but we don't have a sufficiently sophisticated system to just show the right data that the user needs. Right? It's sort of like, you know how there's like like in React, there's that method you have to call that says unsafely set inner HTML.
Well, there's also like
Angular has one also. It's like you almost have to like apologize by typing the method name of what you're doing.
I mean, mobile apps, if you think about those, like you don't ever just like if I'm on Reddit, for example, the mobile app, I have to scroll all the way to the top and like scroll down a bit to do a refresh.
A pull to refresh. Right.
So that could be like that situation.
So
like a desktop app probably would never do that because we're assuming you're on a computer. I mean, there may be cases, but we're assuming you have a sophisticated.
There's much less boundary between them.
Yes, we're assuming you have a sophisticated enough computer and internet that doesn't matter.
Accepting that explicit refresh is not as good as automatically showing right data.
Yes.
What if our first foray toward what you're talking about was a step we called we may even just like make a temp step here like async pipe with explicit refresh.
Okay.
Right? Would that be
with the trigger syntax or just?
Oh yeah, sure. We'll figure out how we're going to implement it, right? But just like we would copy this step and have so you can go ahead and do that, and we'll just put it as 304 for now.
Right. Skip.
And we'll call it like So you got to do a new however you make your computer do it.
Just do a CP.
Oh yeah.
Okay, mine would just be easier.
You can just paste it here.
You can
Control V.
Control C, Control V. Yeah.
Does he have to do anything to avoid putting it inside? Do you happen to know?
I think there should be a way to like duplicate it.
Not here.
Not here. There's not. So can you just Control C, Control V? Like, does that work? Yes, it does. Okay, so you can name it 304 skip async pipe with explicit refresh. Async pipe explicit refresh, something like that.
Something, yeah.
And then we can start working on how best to implement it, right? And this serves as like the simplest possible trigger subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should call it trigger subject.
Let's call it. Well, let's name it after like the usage scenario first.
Right. So you write your paper first, and then write your intro.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have our context, right? And so the context we should describe, ideally we'd even implement if we could figure out how, is something that's like more like pull to refresh. Because you probably shouldn't feel bad if you're doing pull to refresh, but you probably should feel bad if you're writing a desktop thing that doesn't just show the right data in the first place. Does that make sense?
I agree with that.
So one thing to do here is to revert 303.
Yeah.
Yes, that too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then now, Chris, what are your thoughts on the best way to implement this explicit refresh? So the trigger, would you put the trigger subject in the service or in the code consuming the service?
I would put it. I feel like this. Normally we put like the backend calls and the logic around that in the service, but the trigger subject. Maybe it kind of depends on the scenario, right? Like if it's I have this component with all these different ways to refresh the data, then maybe it's part of the components feature. But
for me, it just depends on whether or not the thing we're triggering is data oriented or if it's just like UI oriented.
Yeah. So like if it's data. If it's more of a global data store service.
If it's like an
actual
cache,
data layer, right?
If it's a global cache you want to invalidate, then you do it in the service.
Right.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that that's like a deeper step, so maybe we should reserve that for later, doing it in the service.
Yeah, that's very possible.
And so maybe more like what Chris said, you should do that same thing in the component. So how would we achieve that, Chris?
So like the refresh subject. So I mean, take the subject and put it in the component, and then in the component you would have your subject.pipe switch map, and then it would call employee loader service .get employees or whatever. Have we gotten that far in this?
I think so.
I mean, because right. I mean, the actual HTTP call itself would want it to be an employee loader service, right?
Right. I basically removed the function and threw it in Constructor to give it assign it to a property. But
So we're saying, we're saying that the
Yeah.
wait, what are you doing, Jack?
Oh, because
doing
you
what
have
you
it
said,
in your
right?
as.
Why are you?
Yeah,
yeah, it used
okay.
to be a function.
What
I
is the
removed that.
purpose of having a getEmployees function versus just returning an observable called employee? Having an observable called employees.
No, because we're moving the employee's observable and the refresh trigger subject into the component.
Yeah, I understand.
So are we resubscribing to the same observable over and over again, or are we trying to get new observables?
That's what I'm asking. You should only get a new observable if you need one. Why do we need one?
Because every time we
No,
refresh, we want to get a new observable, don't we?
You can just
Not
resubscribe.
if it doesn't change, right?
I guess.
So
So
if you
since
hand
this has no input, like.
if you hand switch map the same observable, does it unsubscribe and subscribe?
I don't know
I
if
think so.
that's a good question.
So like,
We will certainly.
We will find out. So let's
So
not,
you're saying
not do
that-
the function for now.
So you're saying I should do this?
Don't do it there though. Please, God no.
Why not?
Just do it in the constructor.
What's
Yeah.
Why
wrong
would I
with
do it in the
there?
constructor?
What's wrong with there?
I prefer it in the constructor.
But what's wrong with it there?
Technically nothing, but it's harder to read.
Why is it
Yeah.
harder to read?
I agree.
We have had some examples where you have 15 of those, and then they're not 3 lines. You have 15 of those that are all 10 lines and all above the constructor.
But what?
And
So what?
I find it very hard to read.
Are you
Yeah.
cutting
In
and
this
pasting those
case,
to
in this
other
case,
places?
no. But the pattern as this grows, I find it unreadable.
Especially if
I
we're using
agree.
something like this.htp, which is coming from
So
the constructor.
the reason I like having it in one place is that then you don't have the word employees proliferating to 2 places that you have to then correlate what they are. We both declared it and defined it in one place.
Yeah.
And there's no. And you're saying the concern is like having to read ahead to figure out where this.http came from is kind of an ugly bit,
Well,
right?
it's kind of weird because like I like to see here's my properties, here's my constructor, here's my methods, and I expect the logic to be in the constructor or below. Now you're scrolling through all these extra lines trying to find the constructor.
So you're saying you like
this
having.
is so small, but you know,
You're
we
saying
have
that-
2,000 line files.
Right, yeah.
So you're saying the challenge with this approach is that when it gets big, it's hard to even figure out what are all the members of your class.
Yes.
Yes.
That makes
Because
sense.
it's hard to separate functionality from members
Sure.
at that point.
That
Yes.
makes sense.
What do we think
But-
about this compromise?
No,
But we just
No.
mentioned that we don't want it to be in a function because we want
But
to
it's
test.
private.
because you should only get a new one. You're gonna call it from there.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't do it for me because
I would still want it in the constructor.
now I've mentioned it more times. And if you're not gonna put the top, you might as well just put it in the constructor.
Yeah, now you have a method you intend to only ever call once.
Right, and it
True.
seems like the things you only want to do once, putting them in the constructor is like super obvious, right? The other thing I like about the constructor is then you don't have to say private HTTP. You can just say HTTP.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really nice. So you can take out the this on the HTTP. You can take out the private. Is it? I guess you have to explicitly type, but explicitly type is
I
not bad.
prefer explicit
I would
typing.
explore with explicit type, yeah.
Yeah.
Just in case you're not actually making sure your data.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you just do that and you might not map things correctly,
Yeah.
then you might not have
Yeah.
the observable you want.
Right. I think you can shoot yourself in the foot.
So the nice thing about this is that it's just super obvious what's going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I have a proposed change to this code to help achieve a thing that you were having trouble with when you demoed it for us. What if we returned, what if we defined another type, another interface, that was like a roster, called a roster, and it includes a list of employees and an as of date. And that
in
way,
terms of like,
each time you resubscribe,
Oh, you
we
can
tack
see
on
it.
the current as of date.
Oh,
So when you
I like
press
that.
the refresh, you can tell it worked.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that.
Well, see, the only other thing I could possibly think of is we just do a start with empty array, so it goes away and it comes back. But that's kind of, that's not something you would do, right? Like I don't know,
And, like-
I would never do that.
Yeah, it depends. I
Well,
mean,
the
well, not for a refresh, but
Yeah,
for
not for
like,
yeah.
Right.
clicking filter toggles and stuff
Yeah,
like
I would-
that.
Yeah. Well, the challenge with that is that, like an empty array, you're like actually, like you really want a more explicit indicator. And as of, could that be a date or should that be a string?
Could be either.
Yeah.
If we can make it a date.
JavaScript dates are so ugly.
Make it a number.
Capital date, yeah. Okay, so now when you, now you gotta make that,
It's uppercase
it's capital
D.
D, yeah.
Yeah. There's
So
not
now-
a primitive.
Now you gotta make that be an observable roster. And then you already have a pipe map. So in that map, you need to return an object. So you can like do the open paren, open curly brace syntax to do so. And then you can put the right stuff in there. Yeah, as of new date.
So here's a question.
It'll auto format for you.
Yeah, I know, but like, so, but
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, call it the constructor. Yeah. So does it auto format? Oh yes, it should be much nicer. Okay, what's the problem?
So, I don't know about this order. I was gonna put it.
Oh, whatever.
Alphabetical. Okay. I thought you like some grand.
I thought there was gonna be some deep criticism of the correctness of the code.
Well, so the other question is like, if I define an interface in this order,
sure.
Like, how do you feel about defining them in a different order down here?
That happens.
Do you care?
If it becomes a problem, I would use the lint setting that like forces you to do them in alphabetical or whatever. Because I really don't want to have it be like a human has to inspect. I really don't like human linting.
Yeah.
Mostly because I end up being a human linter. Like we're all growing closer to death at a rate of 1 day per day. How many do you want to spend being a human linter?
Okay, so now here we want to do something different, right? Because this is now
roster.
Is a roster.
So what I really like about that service now is that it's like a completely like canonical, nice, crisp implementation of a service. And then that puts all of our interesting stuff like here in this file where we can like talk about it more easily.
So in the fetch the data now it's just this dot refresh dot next.
And it should probably be a replay subject. But...
Now, talk to me about why you
Why
keep
is it
talking about
replay
replay subjects and so on.
Because we want to get the data right when we start off. We don't want to have to like initiate an action to get the first set of data.
And what is the benefit of being a replay versus an ordinary behavior subject that already has a value?
Well, because behavior subject gives you the ability to say get value, and we don't want that.
Ah, okay.
But it has no. I mean, it's a void subject anyway. Like,
And what's the value? What's the problem with not just saying start with?
That's another.
Yeah, that's probably what
I guess, but it's an extra line of code versus just creating it as a non-subject.
I'm sorry. What is? I don't really. I've never used a replay subject. What exactly is a replay subject?
It is like a behavior subject in that it gives you the ability to set an initial value that is remembered, and anything that subscribes to it later will get it. But it is not like a behavior subject in that it does not have a get value or value.
It's what you get if you call publish replay 1 or whatever.
Okay.
My sense is that like really you should be using observable almost all the time. You should occasionally be using subject, and really occasionally using behavior subject, and only like super special code should utter the name of like a replay subject. That's my sense. It's like you should be like an RX ninja with a very special need to like utter the name of those bizarre deep in the toolbox subjects. So I would much rather have an ordinary subject with an ordinary start with than have a more weird thing.
I'm pretty sure you have to explicitly do.
You can make it subject void. I think you can make it start with void. I think.
Read pipe.
Well, no, the type of
subject.
it is void, but start with undefined.
Yeah.
And you could also
As, you're about to say as void.
Yeah. Well, first he's got to type the subject as void.
Yeah.
Just to be able to move forward, right? We don't know.
No, you don't
No,
need
I
to do
think you
as
have.
void.
I think you do.
No, I do this a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
At least
okay,
with
and it may be
behavior
that the
subjects.
code that I work on, we don't have our strictness settings, so maybe with different strictness it would matter. But that works.
So
Okay.
the reason I like doing that is I'm being super explicit
Right, yeah.
that this
Maybe
is
it's
only
null,
a
it's
trigger.
null, it doesn't work.
The value flowing through it does not matter. That's why I do it that way.
Interesting.
I wonder
I
if
still
you could
Mm-hmm.
prefer to use.
Refresh next.
Oh,
undefined.
I can't do that because I need to make refresh be. Because as soon as I start piping it, it's no longer a subject.
Which is why.
Well,
that would be-
don't start with it here. You start with it at the point of consumption.
That's why I wanted the replays.
Let's do the behavior subject. That's the point of the behavior subject.
Well, no, you said a
I
behavior
guess I
subject.
would just call next explicitly. Is that
No.
morally wrong?
Because you can do the start with at the
And the
point.
constructor.
Because this won't work because.
Why?
Well, wait.
Why won't this work?
Oh yeah, it
Why-
would. Okay, I'm sorry.
Refresh the pipe.
That's fine.
Service
And
data.
I thought you'd have to.
Yeah, that works.
It
Okay.
seems like it would work.
I thought you'd have. I couldn't remember if you'd have to put an undefined in the argument on line
So
26. I'm
there's
pretty
a
sure you did.
really important issue.
you
I'm not
don't,
sure.
right.
I'm not sure how we.
You don't have to pass anything to next.
I'm not sure how we test this or demo it.
I think you used to.
But let's say you had a behavior subject or a replay subject. We're still going to maintain the thing where nothing happens until we actually subscribe, right? We're not going to accidentally trigger anything early.
Like what? Yeah.
Okay.
It's still a lazy observable.
Okay. So does this actually work right now? Will this?
Well, we need to
It
update
should.
our template, right? Because this needs to be, we're going to do, instead of employee data, it's going to be employee data dot employees.
Should we call it roster?
Yeah, it should probably be it. And our service should be like roster service or something.
Well, they can't do that, Jack.
Why not?
It has to be out after the
Async
async.
database.
After the
You have
async.
to pipe the name it. Yeah, you got to name it roster also.
Rename the service.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah, we need to.
Rename all the things, basically.
I don't know if we need to rename the service, but
But it's not an employee loader service, it's a
Well,
roster service.
Yeah, it's that part might be okay, but you definitely need to call the variable roster because like that way it makes sense because that's
True.
it's a more reasonable type.
should we put a $sign on the end?
Yes.
Do not want to have that discussion.
It's already
again.
410.
So there's a previous episode that I was mercifully absent for where this was discussed for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I had to watch that episode, and for the life of me, I cannot remember the conclusion that was drawn.
I don't think we came
There
to that
was no conclusion.
And
There
I
never
hope I
is.
never do.
Yeah, there never is a conclusion.
Yeah.
How about this? A tool in your IDE that you do a user level setting, and it shows a $sign if they're observables if you like them or not. And that way those who like them get them.
Make an extension.
All right. Now we're gonna have to do a share because we're.
Okay, so
Yeah.
ideally here you would do an ng if on the roster, right?
So you could do an ng if
Mhm.
where at the UL level?
Yeah, like basically high enough up you do an if, and then you capture the results.
I reject the notion that that's ideal.
Well, we
because ng.
So
we don't have an ng let.
Yeah, because I think ng let would be better.
So ng let would be better if we had it.
Yeah.
But
If you're
Well,
gonna bring up the word ideal, I
But
want
we also
ideal.
having a loading thing is also nice.
yeah, how do you propose
else, right?
to show? Yeah, right. Because you do an if, you can do an else when it's loaded,
Yeah.
right?
That is the thing that
Roster.
got me yelled at.
I wouldn't do
this
that.
is what started the $sign discussion.
I wouldn't do
Oh,
that
gosh.
up there. I wouldn't do that up there,
Oh man.
and I sure wouldn't do that.
Roster $async as roster is the only correct way.
But
Oh.
regardless, you need to put at the right level of the DOM at which you put the loading
Only
mark.
the
'Cause,
Sims
you,
speak in absolutes.
You see what I'm saying? Like you
Okay.
wouldn't have the whole card missing while it's loading.
Yeah.
You'd have the title present, and
You
then
like
also
here.
want the button too.
you might even have to put
I think we'll
another.
have to put another layer in.
You you probably should put another layer on it. I mean, that's what I do in a real
container?
program.
Yeah, ng
No.
container.
Yes, our friend ng container.
A container, you do a container that way it doesn't have to mix onto the same line as the UL, right? Because it's kind of hideous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that better too.
And then you
And then
Whoa.
ng,
Yeah.
it's like ng container, ng template right next to each other. It's
And
nice
with the else,
yeah,
yeah.
it's nice and neat.
I think I think that's like, and if we're trying to show a nice way to do it,
Right.
real,
So
yeah.
what are we calling this?
I don't know. Data.
I proposed this last time.
Which is exactly the opposite.
A madman, complete as a monster would do this.
We're gonna get into this discussion every time we have an async.
we are. Pretty much. We can't use ngif anymore.
I mean,
much.
did
Yeah.
you see my proposed solution?
I don't think so.
My proposed solution was to reach deep into the Unicode bucket and do some kind of
I guess
googly
smiley
eyes to
emoji.
mean
Oh,
the
that's
observable.
right. Yeah.
But it wouldn't
Smiley
work
emoji.
because I need to open this issue because TypeScript accepts any Unicode character as part of an identifier,
Mhm.
which means you can trivially write a TypeScript identifier which Angular will not let you reference from a template. And I think that's actually an obvious defect in the template
Yeah.
compiler. I don't think the template compiler shouldn't be it should let you use any TypeScript identifier. It shouldn't be well, you can use a subset of the TypeScript language.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Well-
then you could do my googly eyes for and that is really good. And that's
And,
I like it, but it's just funny.
and I mean,
We're slowly becoming Swift, where we can just use emoticons
Roster
in our
Safari,
code.
very nice. I mean, as English speakers, we don't have to worry about it as much. But Russian speakers, anyone any name that they would want to use that isn't part of the ASCII, it causes them trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
In other words, why does the template compiler not accept how international Angular's community is? Because the community is amazingly international.
There was
I feel
actually
like the template compiler needs
there was
to
a
be too.
discussion on one of the Angular podcasts recently where Shai Resnick said most of the Angular community does not speak English, and almost every non-English community pronounces it as Angular. So officially, because of who uses it, it's Angular, not Angular from now on. I mean, he has no authority to
Ouch.
impose that, but that was a discussion.
I had the discussion with some, I think, Brits about router and router.
Oh gosh.
Because the people over there, they're like, router, that's a strange way to say it. And I pointed out that I think this is actually a slight differential advantage of our pronunciation here. Because if you say it router, then you only have one pronunciation, right? The word root is commonly used in computer science.
Right.
And so is the word that we say route. But if you pronounce them both root, then they're homonyms. But the way we pronounce them is root versus route. We actually have different pronunciations for these different words, and it's very helpful. That doesn't help us here at all, but it is a nice diversion.
So
Yes.
roster pipe through async.
Just make up a variable name so we don't have to have this discussion again. It was terrible.
Or let's put the $sign on the observable for now, and just go with it, and we'll have a conversation with
What if
Paul.
we just
All
didn't
losers.
use this and just did the share instead?
That's true too. We
Then
could
we
just
wouldn't have to. We
But we
wouldn't
want a
have
loading
to face
symbol.
these hard
No,
naming
I don't-
problems.
We want loading.
Yeah, we don't. I don't. Yeah, we do want loading.
Like
we
the whole
don't
point
want
of this
share.
was to trigger
Yeah.
the refresh
Just-
through some means besides a button, and it would just show a loading.
How-
Something
how
so we
does
can
using
move
a
on.
share
Because I
work?
really want.
Effectively
It's like
stop that.
it's 4:15 and we
wouldn't
got to
use
get a
NGS.
commit up. Okay, so
So we're not
just
going
do whatever you're gonna do, $sign or whatever. But we need to
Oh,
move
the
forward.
load-
We
I see
can't
what you're
remain
saying.
stuck here.
let's just put a $sign at
Yeah,
the end
just-
of it for
yeah, that's
now.
what I
We have to
and
keep
we'll have to
moving.
have that fight
Right.
somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Paul can review it after it's in there. We can't not finish because of this $sign.
Yeah.
Correct.
We have to not finish for a real reason, not for a fake reason.
Okay. I mean, it's
And then what's
a real
the
reason.
what's the bit to show us a loading?
Oh,
Else.
Right.
NG template with else.
Because I think the loading is kind of important on this example.
Right.
Because the whole point is you want to see it loading again when you.
is it?
Let's not call it else. Let's
Oh
call
gosh, no.
it loading.
Like loading. Yeah.
What
Like loading roster.
if you call it else? Does you have to say like else or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally say else. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
nice.
bad.
Nice.
Okay, and then
Just
here-
loading ... I
Check
think
in
would be
roster
fine.
is roster and else else. No, I call it.
You just have one variable name that we use for everything.
Yes.
Let's make our naming
All right.
easier.
And then
So
in
many
order for that to
self-defined
work on
scope
line
versus
6,
renamed.
after the roster, we have to
Okay.
have semicolon else. Yeah, right there.
Semicolon else.
Semicolon else loading roster. Now, we're not actually showing the as of date anywhere, so we need to do
Well, that was
that
the whole
now
point
there's
of
room
this.
to do that.
and get a nice date pipe.
right in here, so we can
Yeah.
do like
you can
a.
P or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Date pipe.
As of or whatever. Just make sure you put the words as of in front of it.
I guess it can't find the type.
No, it did.
Okay, and then, yeah, he was saying put the words as of before it on line 17.
As of.
Oh,
Yeah, label your data. That's what I was getting at. Okay, so let's see if this actually works before we start picking away at the perfection thereof.
So you need to go
Oh.
to the next
You
step.
still have it
Yeah.
running?
oh,
Yeah, you
wait.
gotta go to the next step.
You have to
step.
restart it because we don't.
Oh, it doesn't
That
pick up
too.
the-
Yeah, it's not going to pick up any of your changes,
Yeah,
so might
that's
as well
such a weird
restart.
thing, yeah.
Doesn't pick up new files.
Or new, does it pick up new files but not new directories? I think it'll serve new files, it just won't list new directories on the list.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So what was this?
It's on to the left.
3 or 4.
304. This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Probably
So now
wanna
I
show
think
the
we need a time
timestamp.
on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Alright guys, we gotta wait till tomorrow.
well, what you do is you do this at the
Thankfully we
end
got
of
to
the
this on
day.
day
And
two.
No, it's actually that's not going
Is
to be
that
right.
not
you
right?
gotta give it a full. I think you
It's
say a
colon.
long time. Date colon
Uh,
quote
It's
short
date
time.
colon. Short.
Date colon
Open small quote, right?
Yeah.
quote, and then I mean short time, but is it?
Short or long, I don't really care.
I think it's capital T. Second T is capitalized. I think.
And is
That
that
is
going to show
worth-
seconds? I guess we'll find out in a moment. Yeah, let's see if it's good enough. Oh, close.
Could do medium time or long time.
I like the idea that you have to like paste the class perfectly to do this at the end of the day, and then leave it on the screen as you leave and come back, and then you get one chance in the morning to press
Long-
refresh.
There we go.
Okay.
Long time.
That's
today.
workable. Okay, why don't you commit this as a kind of interim step before we start poking away at it?
Well, and it's also quite a bit after beer 30, so maybe we're done for the day.
We might be, but let's see what we can get. Why don't you go ahead and push that just in case we happen to find that we're done for the day. So is there anything in this code that could be better teaching, either better production or better teaching, that we would do differently, other than the name of the variable?
I was going to say the name.
Have we actually talked about ng container, ng template, ng else, if else before this point? And I don't think we have.
ng if else is in a like 700 step.
Yeah.
So do we want to introduce that?
Can't do it. Yeah, we can't do it.
So
okay, I have a question.
I almost always talk about it.
In an earlier one of these, if else was introduced like in the early part, right? Like
Yeah.
Now it's just an extra step.
Bill's been pushing for it to be presented earlier in the curriculum.
Which
I think
this is a good place to do it.
I used to present it right after I presented if or even part of if.
Yeah, I usually kind of.
The question is, now somebody at some point objected to that. Like, oh no, we hardly use that. But I believe that every single paying customer should have a great experience in class. And to make that true, you have to assume that instructors will teach the material in the order we have it. Not assume the instructors, every single one of us, happen to know, oh, at this point I got to jump ahead and go do that one.
Right.
So if you're saying you always introduce it, I'm saying I always. Is there anybody that has an argument to not introduce if else right after if? Because every student wants it, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you figure out where we introduce if else and just see if we can move that? Maybe search for else.
It's
Is that
the
how you
same
define
point we
it?
do
That's
for
going to
loops.
fit a lot of things.
If you
Not
scroll
that
up,
many.
I guess we just do it in
We don't do
a.
it's in the 200s.
Yeah, it's in the
HTML.
200, so we can find it. It's
If you-
template conditionals and
If you look
looping.
for else in
Yeah, it's
HTML,
202.
202.
but this is going to
We're
be.
in here.
There.
But you've just found where we don't introduce it, right?
Right.
You need to find where we do introduce
Oh.
it by
Oh,
which is
searching
this
for the word
700.
else
Yeah.
in the HTML files.
It's
That's
the
what
700 stuff or whatever.
And I think if you just start HTML, it automatically finds it deeply. I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if this should work. This should find it. Okay, hit the button here. So what
Yeah,
do we
so
do?
700.
this
Yeah,
one,
so
so
724. So let's go
Yeah.
look at 724. Just running
Oh
724
yes,
or
this
whatever.
one.
Oh,
It's
it's its own step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is okay. Like,
Right.
See,
It's
I
just
don't.
it's an extra step that would only happen at like afternoon of day 3 though, which is weird.
But every student wants to know about
Right,
it.
I know.
So I object to it only being if you think
Yes.
of it.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I feel like, else was added late, right?
That's
Yeah.
I feel like with only at the end because it got added later.
You're right.
Yeah, it
Because
is.
normally, you go to learn programming and you're coming from anywhere else, you're like, well, of course I learn else with if. What the hell?
Right.
You know,
Like if else for loop done.
yeah,
So why don't we
so-
do, is there any problem with renumbering
Switch.
this to be right after we
True,
introduce
but
if?
switch is
I don't
I
think
don't know.
so.
So go find where that is.
Switch is actually a
That's
company's
202.
case.
So
202.5.
202.5.
Yeah.
Is this good enough to be? Is it?
I think it used to be up there somewhere. And
Paul will have nothing to say about this.
check in the explanation of
Absolutely
that thing.
not.
Is there any explanation? Is there any
There
instructor
is,
file in here?
No.
Nope.
So, but there's no instructor. Okay, so it's not going to mess up our outline.
Is there a
Is there?
workshop?
Wait, why is there a workshop? Oh yeah, okay. I was going to say, tell me there's not a workshop for else. Yeah, so it's a tiny little step,
We
right?
could
It's like
workshop it,
super
yeah.
harmless. And by doing that, now we're free to use it. Because I really don't think we should be introducing if else at the same time we're introducing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then ng container. We have a separate 700 step for ng
ng
container.
container. Yeah. And ng template.
Okay, next question.
Containers show useful.
Next
right?
question.
Yeah.
I almost always show it off instantly.
And you almost always use it with ngf.
A local question. Why do we have a p tag around? What is this?
This is the step we just moved.
Oh,
Well, because inside that, if it's ng container and ng template, it's not actually.
makes
yeah,
sense.
no,
It's just a
beside
p
it.
tag of
Okay,
text.
okay.
Those are phantom
yeah,
elements.
I probably would have just made each of those a p tag because it really there is no underlying efficiency.
Yeah,
To having
pretty
this.
much.
Why don't you just change? Oh wait, if you change. Wait a second. Let me think about this. where do we introduce ng-container and ng-template? Because we thought that
That's
might
what I
actually be
just
a
said.
problem. If we change these to p tags, we might be able to relieve a dependency. So figure out where we introduce ng-container.
It's down to 700 stuff.
Well, it's a search. I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
You just click up there and type
But you have to
ng-container.
use ng-template because it's an else, right?
You do. That's true.
So we get rid of
Okay,
container,
so-
we get rid of else, or
Mm.
template.
500.
Wait, explicitly.
So we just start
Oh, that's
using
right.
it.
Yeah.
But there actually is a 7, like literally the 700
Heaven's
step.
sake. I hate the thing where we didn't want to talk about something, so we like, oh yeah, let's just like put it way down the list. But then it turns out we
Yeah.
actually needed it, like you've been saying,
Yeah.
and so we just like start doing it in line.
Yep.
Like I don't, like we're not helping. Like
And then we forget to explain it because
so,
Just
let's
in
look
line.
at 700. Is there any reason 700 couldn't go right before the step we just looked at?
that's a lot of UI.
I feel like we now need Bazel to do dependency management for our steps.
I mean,
It's
that
probably
possible?
quite that complex, but I mean, I think we.
I think this could probably.
This is like an awesome thing that Bill made.
Wait,
Yeah.
what? Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
Ecovisor.
Refenestrate.
Well,
Are
you
these
know.
real words?
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
these
well,
are real words.
They're
These
Bill
are,
words.
These
They-
are words.
They
yes.
are. I mean, the definition of what a real word is a philosophical thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
But
like, is
these
that
were
like-
not invented for this.
Okay, like that's actually the term for a dinosaur's tail.
Well,
thing?
So-
there's a story behind that.
Yeah. So there's a comic called The Far Side
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
where he did a one-panel comic where it's these cavemen, and the caveman in the front is pointing to a picture of a thagomizer, and he says, "This is the thagomizer after the late Thag Simmons," and then paleontologists realized that they didn't actually have a word for that thing, and so
they
they
made-
just adopted thagomizer.
The funny thing is, I happened yesterday to be listening to a podcast about dinosaurs, and a paleontologist was said, "Yeah, people use that, but we were annoyed because we did have a word for spikes. It was spikes."
Yeah.
But they didn't have a word specifically for
4 to 10.
those spikes on the
Right.
tail of a stegosaurus.
I actually like
Florida?
refenestrate.
And I was like, and Sarah was, and I'm like, watch out for deer. And she's like, ooh, we should have a code word. I'm like, how about deer?
Okay, so refenestrate. Okay, so is there any reason this could not be much sooner? Because like if we're gonna use like if we have a step to introduce ng-container, and we're gonna start using ng-container, it's stupid to start using it before we introduce it. It's just like broken.
I think we also have a step for ng-template too.
So where do we first use ng-container?
It's so critical.
505.
Yeah,
of
500.
NG4.
Go back to your search.
So where is it? Wait,
So,
where?
oh no,
505 was
It
It was
no,
505.
You got to use the search.
yeah.
It
So
was
the
it was
first-
505.
Use is at
Well, we're proposing adding it at 302 and or 202 and 304. Other than that, the first use was in 505.
I think we should add it. It should be 202.6.
is there? Wait a second. So
But now it has to
It'd be
it had to be
202.4.
202.4.
what, just I'm staring at this.
Wait,
So
what? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
we previously first used it at 505, right? But we're talking about adding it in 2 places, right? Is that what you're saying?
Because we're
Now,
adding it in 202.
For the sake of only burning so many bridges with any given commit, how about if we just, since we're working on 202.5 and 304, why don't we change those to not need ng-container? And then we don't have to solve this problem as part of. See, one
We
it's
still
like,
have the problem of
remember, it's
ng-template.
like, what do we always have to like help people with at client sides on big projects, right? They start working on something in a branch, then they start like solving all kinds of other problems in that branch. And like
Yeah,
the
more
discipline to
branches.
try to get something committed and merged is to not try to solve every problem in your software in one branch.
Mm.
So I think we can just punt on this problem if we just edit the 2 things we're doing anyway to not use ng-container.
We still have the problem of ng-template though.
But we don't need to solve both of those in this branch. So if we stop solving ng-container in this branch,
Okay, and
then we'll
resolve,
turn our
okay.
attention to ng-template. See what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it seems
that's
like
fine.
that whole like what about thing.
Yeah.
The what about thing.
I just want to make sure we remember that
Like,
ng-template could
so,
be a problem.
oh yeah. Oh no, yes.
MG
Yeah.
template, I feel like
You
you're
have to
most
have that for
likely
else.
to use it
With an else.
for the else,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So it's a good time to introduce it. If
So
Yeah.
it
let's make those 2 files that use ng-container not use ng-container now, so we can move on.
Okay.
So all 3.
So the
So this one, so we're saying don't use ng container.
yeah, just make that a p tag.
And at that point, the ng template should just be.
In the template, just put a p tag inside it. It's fine. Because there's no actual efficiency at runtime to what Angular is doing to like share the p. It's not like actually sharing the p
Right,
tag.
What did that even do?
Whoa, I would undo
Yeah.
that.
What's happening?
Yeah.
Last week.
What?
Yeah, don't do that.
What'd you do?
Yeah, undo until the pane goes away.
I
Don't
keep
wanna-
hitting Control Z and just flip back and forth.
Wow.
I don't know what you did. but-
Okay, well, you're going to have to fix it by hand then. Close the file without saving, go back in, and try to not have this ever happen again. Okay, if you go back to the
Control E.
search, the search will take you to the files you have to work on. Okay, so this is the file we have to work on, right?
Yes.
Okay, so change that one to a p tag. Take out the existing p tag. Take out the other side of the p tag, and then press save before you risk breaking it again. Now, what on earth?
Yeah, it tried to complete the ng template, and then
Oh, weird. Okay, now
I think it's because it auto formatted as you're trying to edit.
Oh, that's gross. Yeah, try that. Okay,
Alright.
that's less gross.
get rid of.
Okay,
Let
so
me finish
Wait, what? Why do you have an ending?
because it got confused.
yeah, it's trying to help.
Okay, I might have just been not with it, but I thought last week I was doing something where I accidentally did the, in this case, hash even marker on a p. Like I didn't use an ng template, and I thought it worked.
As long as you do a hash, it assigns local variable.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an ng template.
So we keep saying we need to have an ng template. We need to have it. Why do we need an ng template if we don't need an ng template?
Because I'm not sure that well, listen, let's solve the ng container problem first and get that committed and pushed.
Okay.
Like we need to make
Yeah,
increments.
sure.
See, because some of us are going to be out of town part of next week. We're not even going to think about this for a week. We can't keep expanding. We got to collapse our scope and commit something.
Sure.
Okay, so by doing this, and it should be this has a more of a div nature, Jack. Just by the nature of what it is, since it occupies rectangular space on the screen, the div is a more. Okay, so how does our ng container situation look right now?
505 is now the first place it uses it.
And that was there before.
Yeah.
So we're not going to try to solve that problem. Can we commit at this point before we
so.
start investigating
Can we delete
template?
line 5 though, because it's
Thank you.
Wait, where?
that
Comments.
outdated comment.
Yeah, that's gross. Okay. Okay, so we could commit. Yeah.
So
Well, no, but you're not undoing a thing, Jack, because we haven't even done the thing,
Oh.
right?
It's
So
it's
what we're-
moving.
Introduce.
It's moving else if earlier.
Yeah, introduce else before we use it.
Yeah.
And is that the only change in this commit?
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't just say earlier. Say before we use it, because that's motivated, right? We didn't just I woke up this morning and felt like doing it earlier. It's no.
Well, yeah. Let's. What else is staged in here?
Is it just this?
And then.
Okay, comma avoid ng container before we use it.
Yeah.
Avoid ng container before we introduce it. Which again, we didn't fix 505, but
right, but that was there before. So.
right, we're trying to get something done before we what about around it.
Yeah. Side
Okay.
note, there's a problem with this branch.
Yeah.
Is I also had a separate idea inside the same branch.
I mean, I don't think we're going to finish it.
Well,
No, I'm
yeah.
just saying don't just
Yeah,
cherry
yeah.
pick this entire branch.
Oh, I
because
know.
it's not-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know we're gonna have to chop out some leftover stuff. Okay, so now your question is, so you didn't want to lose ng template, right?
Yeah. So
So
ng
the same
template is
search
a
on ng
different step.
template,
Yeah.
right? And so let's figure out, do we have an ng template problem of where we use it?
And do we even need to use ng template?
Which I had no idea. We might.
But as I said, I could be wrong. I might have just been.
I feel like it's if you use id
Oh.
equals.
Wait a second.
I feel like it shouldn't work.
We never introduce it.
Wait. I thought we had a step.
We
That's what
literally
it is.
have never used it until.
So ng container step doesn't even use it.
Oh wait, this was super intentional, right? Because we didn't introduce else until 700 something, so we didn't introduce ng template until 700 something, so we didn't use
I
ng.
actually thought we had a step
There's
on it.
really no reason to use ng template unless it's just with an else or with a third-party widget library that wants you to pass in templates.
Yeah. So
And can we?
I'm
Use
okay with what we
template
have right here. I think this is
outwards.
fine from an ng template point of view.
And can we just
Can we
humor me and see if it actually matters? Like
Yeah,
change.
I'm very curious
'Cause
that would shock me.
I could
Change that to, like,
easily
a
have been
span.
wrong and just like
Yeah, we're-
things
Actually-
weren't working
'Cause I feel
correct.
like
Delete
you
that.
render it always.
Yeah, that could be
That'll work for now, but-
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's gonna? We need to get.
I
the
think
next
as long as
step
you
up.
use the hash, that's fine.
What? So does it actually reach in and turn off the one?
Okay, so no, all right, so it's not working.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
it must be a
okay,
template.
great.
ref.
Yeah.
all right. So
Okay.
I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it in those terms.
I think
but
it's if you're doing something like a view job on
Yeah,
a
maybe I
on
could-
a hash,
yeah.
that works.
Yeah, view child can
Yeah,
grab
yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have anything else to.
Okay, so do you want to undo some? You said there was an unrelated idea in this branch. You might want to
Yes,
peel
that
out.
might need to be in a separate branch. I just threw them
Okay.
together because I
Right.
didn't want to categorize them.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It was with the it's in
Well,
the-
there's that. Remove scan example is.
Well, that's already in.
Oh, that was
So
okay.
go to the previous commit.
Random extra thoughts.
Yes. So 600. We don't want that in there. Probably. Because I was doing stuff.
Oh yeah, that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah,
That's a way bigger
It's
conversation.
like totally unrelated to this, right?
So do we want to just reverse this?
I
for
would
now?
reverse that and put it in a different, or cherry pick that one line and put it in a different branch or something.
You can.
Reverse it and then unreverse it.
What you can do is you can Control C the contents of the whole file,
Excerpt.
and then you can reverse it on
Yeah,
this
right.
branch. You can make a new branch and just make that one change.
Yes.
Or you could even go do that after
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
rocking the
yeah,
later
yeah.
branch. Okay.
Yeah.
So you could bring that. You could actually put that separate as a separate branch for a future conversation
Yes.
and episode of what we're recording here, which is getting really long.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think
Yeah.
we should pause, right?
Okay, so we're in a good state now, right? Like we're feeling pretty good.
I would go ahead and revert it. I'll grab
Okay.
the file later and make a separate
Cool.
branch.
So we verify it actually works now that we put it back into template.
Yeah, we need to do that. We also need to compile and everything.
Yeah, compile lint and then like
Mhm.
bring up each of these things and
Separate idea or something.
yeah.
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 And then, so if we refresh this, we should see that it works.
Yeah, just the fact that we said 0 is even is.
And then
304 was something we added. Let's make sure that
Right.
works.
So as of 44, as of 48.
Okay.
So that worked.
So if our proposed change has a commit a step we've added that we actually rather like and is good, we can actually unrename the skip from it so that in the branch for
But we also need to rewrite the explanation and the instructor file. I think there's and like change the index HTML.
one of them we looked at literally didn't have any explanation or instructor file.
That was the FL, wasn't it?
Okay, but there's also like the index
304 is what we're
HTML to
looking
get
at.
the name different than the other one
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
copied.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
So is there anything in there? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes.
yeah.
So do you want to take on?
Yeah, I can do that.
So you're going to
Okay.
continue on this branch
Yeah.
and
I can take over.
cool.
So yeah, this is not ready
So I guess
to
we'll just push this.
Cool.
propose on master.
Right.
Okay. So
I can do
we're
all the linting anyway.
we're done together for this week. So I guess goodbye to everybody.
So
It's beer 30 here.
remember, Twitter handles down below. Like and subscribe. Do all the YouTube things.
To your dirty seal.
And we'll see you next time.